Welcome to Cordell and Cordell's Men's Divorce Podcast, moderated by Managing Partner and CEO Scott Trout, bringing you information for guys before, during, and after divorce, and everything related to family law. This podcast is not to be taken as legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established.
Hey, welcome back to the Men's Divorce Podcast. Scott Trout, CEO, Managing Partner. And today we're going to talk a little bit about mediation. And I know we talked about arbitration and what that means and generally mediation, but we're going to dig into that. But I always caution, and now you're tired of hearing it if you're a subscriber, and that is it can't be legal advice. This is really informative, educational. It's to point you in the right direction. Take some notes. Speak with a lawyer. Speak with someone who practices exclusively in family law, like we do at Cordell and Cordell. You can go to our website, get more information if you're not familiar with this, at cordell.com. You can schedule an appointment for a consult, which is really the only way to get really good advice and any advice at all. And that is you can do it from the website, or you can give us a call at 866-DADS-LAW. And keep an eye out for our Men's Divorce Podcast live. And that is every month, and that's coming up here in November and December. It's free. You can just register, and you can log in, ask questions live of our panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys and our guests that we have on the show as well. So today, repeat guests, we're joined by Alexandria Mederos from Florida. Welcome.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me.
So mediation, I know it gets confusing. Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about arbitration. We talk about I mentioned informal settlement, which is kind of like mediation, where we just get the attorneys involved. But let's just start there. What is mediation?
So mediation is a procedure intended to allow the parties to reach an agreement between themselves. Usually just the parties, the attorneys, and the mediator are present. In Florida, it's confidential, so there's no judge present. Nothing that the parties say during mediation can be used against them. It's just an avenue to allow them to both be in the same room or in the same space at the same time to try to reach an agreement regarding their case.
So you think about mediation, is it mandatory in Florida? Is there a required mandatory mediation? There is here where you have to do, if it's custody involved in certain issues as well, you have to do a couple hours of mediation. Is it mandatory there?
Absolutely. It's mandatory in all counties in Florida before you can go before a final hearing. Some counties require mediation to occur prior to even having temporary relief heard as well.
So I often, I talk to clients in my consults a lot about mediation, whether it's formal or informal. And the difference for me, like what we're talking about is this maybe the more formal type of mediation, which I think it's always an advantage. I'm always looking for ways to decrease cost and explore opportunities. And you can be presumably a little bit more creative in mediation, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And mediation, like you said, it's a cost-effective way to resolve the issues of the case. And most of the time, it puts the decision-making authority in the parties' hands. Sometimes people agree to things at mediation that the judge couldn't necessarily do in their case. And this kind of gives them the authority to have decisions about their lives after their divorce or their paternity action is over.
Yeah. Is it like a mini trial? You can present arguments and facts and try to convince, the other party. It's like a mini trial, but without the formality of a trial, right?
Absolutely. Most of the time, the parties are in separate rooms, so they're not necessarily hearing the case in case in chief, but the mediator definitely brings back nuggets of information from room to room. So you know where the opposing parties' priorities lie. You know what evidence they have, because usually it's exchanged during mediation. They ask for updated evidence to support your position during mediation. And so you're getting a good snapshot of, if we don't settle today, what does the other side want? What do they have? And what could they possibly prove in court? And what are you willing to do to make that go away? And vice versa. A lot of times we come into mediation very well equipped to tell the other side, this is what I have. Do you want to take this before a judge?
Yeah. So we're going to have to spend money. We're going to have to spend time because it's required. So Absolutely. Let's talk about preparing. What do you do to prepare for mediation? A lot of lawyers do it differently, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But how do you prepare?
So the first way that I usually prepare for mediation is to meet with my clients. I like to meet with them far in advance of mediation, depending on the complexity of the case, I meet with them multiple times. And the reason I do this is because I want to make sure that they understand what to expect at mediation first, what we have to ask for, and what we have to give. I also usually use that time to review discovery with my client that I received from the other side to make sure that everything's in line, that I know everything about their case. I wasn't there when they were buying houses or opening bank accounts, so I know as much as they've told me in the past and their spouse has told me. So it's a great time to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row before we get into that room.
So, I just did a mediation, and we use it as an opportunity. We thoroughly prepared, and interestingly, not surprisingly, so when I prepare, I actually have almost a mini trial exhibit book. I want to convince the mediator, which we use a former judge as our mediator. I had everything tabbed, I had everything identified and highlighted, so that it was including case law, because I wanted to really get this judge to force the other side to make some moves from their position. And not surprisingly, they didn't come with any exhibits at all. And so in our mediation, that exhibit book isn't shared with the other side. I just knew that they didn't have it. How is that done in Florida in terms of exhibits? Are they shared with the other side? Is there sharing of discovery, in that meeting? What happens?
So not usually and not typically. If I feel that it will assist my client in reaching a resolution and reaching their litigation goals, I'm definitely going to give the other side everything I have because I want to force that settlement. But I'm not going to share it with them beforehand. The mediator, I will share everything I have prior to mediation with the mediator. I usually do a mediation brief, outlines the facts of the case, all of the assets the parties have, talk about their children, what my client desires, and then I include in there all of my supporting documentation so the mediator knows that I have come prepared and what I say has authority behind it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in this case that I just resolved, they've been going on for almost 3 years and a long time because of obviously COVID delays. And what we prepared early on in that mediation, the judge, I got the sense, understood and felt our offer was probably the stronger offer. And their side didn't take it, which is interesting. But at the end of the day, it's exactly what we settled for 3 years later. And because I said, look, this is what the mediator, if you remember, 2.5 years ago, the mediator told you to take this deal. This is the best you were going to get. And they finally did. And I think there's value in over-preparing. And for me, it allowed me and the client to get ourselves ready if we had to try the case, because then, we get into a conversation of, all right, what do you really want out of this? What's your best case scenario, your worst case scenario? Let's have some offers prepared. And I think from a client perspective, that's a good conversation to have.
Exactly. I like to talk with my client about their best day in court and compare it to what they're asking for. And I like to talk to them about their final offer. What are you willing to settle for to make this all go away and be done for it today? And everything in between. My clients know when they walk into mediation, their first offer is a working offer. They are not married to it. And we have 20 other scenarios that we've already discussed to help them reach their bottom line goal.
Yeah. And so I think preparation is really the most important takeaway from this conversation for me and for clients, because I always say, look, I don't
then items that are negotiable, I would love to take it with me, but I'm not gonna die on that. And then I also have them write things that they don't care about.
Yeah, right. And I think looking at my last mediation, one of the things that was an issue in our case was tax liability. And we had a business that was certainly going to have some taxes due. And so I had our client contact his accountant in advance. And so he was prepared and he knew, okay, this is what we know in 2024, we're going to have X tax liability when we need to divide that. So it's real easy, I think, for many attorneys to just stroll into that mediation in such a casual manner that I do think is a waste of the client's money because they're not really fully prepared to settle a case in an informative manner. And they may do it and maybe it's malpractice and they're not advising the clients. But I think that's kind of that checklist. Call an accountant if you not only just tax liabilities, but post-divorce dissolution issues regarding taxes, right?
Absolutely. Their income tax bracket is going to change once they're no longer married, or if they're claiming a child on their taxes. How is that going to change their tax liability at the end of the day? How is it going to change their disposable income? They definitely should be meeting with an accountant. The transfer of certain assets, such as retirement assets. What tax liability am I going to have to take if I take that now? What if I decide to defer taking it until retirement age? What will that money mean to me? So definitely speaking with an accountant prior to mediation and just making sure that all the ducks are in a row, that the client has the information, because the mediator is not a tax professional and neither are the attorneys in the room. So they should definitely be seeking that expert opinion.
Another issue that comes up and came up in my case, because it's so frequent, we can talk about these common things, is there's a marital home, someone's going to get it, whether you're selling or refinancing, cashing out. Sometimes there's a cash equalization payment, but in my case, there was the opposing party wanted her name and obligation removed from the mortgage. So we had our client reach out to a couple different lenders, mortgage brokers, and be prepared in advance so that he knew, okay, if I do this, if I agree to refinance, which you're not obligated to do so in Missouri, here's what my cost is going to be. I imagine you've come across that as well.
Yes. So I always have my clients go ahead and do the legwork. Tell me how you're going to be able to refinance. Tell me how you're going to be able to afford to pull equity out of that. And then what is your payment going to be? Because that's going to be disposable income for maintenance purposes. We call it alimony in Florida. You definitely need to make a plan on how you're going to refinance, how you're going to buy your spouse out of the home, what the cost is going to be to you, because likely it might be a HELOC, it might be taking a cash out equity from a refinance, and how's that going to change your disposable income each month? And have that plan ready at mediation so you can confidently tell the mediator and the opposing party, I'm ready to do this. Let's go.
The other thing is it's overlooked. Your benefits, health insurance, life insurance, who's your beneficiary, wills, trust, powers of attorney, all those things that you need to be thinking about. Maybe in advance on what's the cost going to be. If your spouse isn't going to be covered in insurance, what is that going to cost? So maybe making a phone call to your employer, the benefits coordinator, and find out all the information in advance of the mediation.
Exactly. And especially if your spouse has been covering you as on their insurance through their employer, it's going to change your deductions on your paycheck each month, and you want to know what the cost is. Maybe it's more cost effective for you to cover the child than it has been for your spouse to cover the child in the future. And you want to make those arguments known, because the cost of insurance in my jurisdiction definitely impact support awards for children. Also, life insurance. In Florida, there's an ability for the court to require that the paying spouse secure their obligations, either alimony or child support, with a life insurance policy. How much is that going to cost you? Do you have the ability to take that out through your employer? Or are you going to have to get a private policy? And those are just things you need to know before you get in there, because you're going to be pressured to make decisions on the spot. And that's the purpose of mediation, is to push you guys to a resolution very quickly. And you want to be very well equipped to make that decision.
Yeah. I think I try to always find examples of pressure points. It's like going to see the doctor and my knee hurts. And so you go in to see your orthopedist and he goes, well, you're going to need surgery. How about in 5 minutes? And that's kind of, imagine the pressure you'd be in. It's like walking into that mediation. Sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not prepared to completely sign on the dotted line when I haven't thought about it. And that's the whole point here of let's think about it. Let's think of all the different scenarios. And if we put this down, would you be comfortable signing on this? Would you be comfortable signing on this and this? And putting together multiple scenarios for the client so that when it does occur, even if there's variances, it's not that serious of a pressure where you feel like I was forced into signing.
No, they feel confident. Even with regard to child issues, what parenting plan do you want? How is that going to work? Do you have the support system in place to make sure that you can exercise what you're asking for? Is your spouse going to be able to exercise what you're asking for with their new life? If they have to get a job, or is there childcare involved? Just making sure that you have being prepared prior to mediation will make mediation a breeze. And you will see the other side is not prepared. 9 times out of 10, I walk into mediation and the opposing party is figuring out their first offer with their client that morning. It's a waste of time. So you're paying 3 different people, both the attorneys and the mediator. It's a waste of everyone's resources, and you feel flustered. They feel flustered and they feel like they can't make a decision that day because they haven't had enough time to process everything, all the decisions that they're being asked to make. And these are permanent decisions.
It is. It's huge. And you mentioned custody, and it's one of those things of maybe the order is more than you anticipated in terms of visitation, custody rights, time sharing. Are you equipped? Do you have the resources? Do you have daycare? Do you have family support? Do you have a house? Do you have an apartment, a condo, living arrangements, a separate bedroom, the furniture? I mean, there's a long list. Those are things you need to talk through before you get to that mediation. I mean, like I said, treat it like it's a trial. Treat it like so you're prepared, because it is. It's a free peek, but it's also an opportunity, right?
Absolutely. And even looking something as minuscule as looking at the holidays for the next year, did you schedule a vacation for you and your child? A cruise at Thanksgiving, like you want to make sure that they're going to be able to go on that with you. And if you sign something that says mom gets Thanksgiving in odd years and you had a cruise this month, well, you're out of luck. You can't go back on that. So, and those are things that just flee out of your head. You're not thinking about them when you're thinking about all of your assets. You're thinking about child support. You're thinking about wrapping up your case today and moving on from your divorce.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think of, and you mentioned kids and taxes, it could be even the tax deduction, thinking forward about, well, if we have odd number of kids, you know, forming your offer so that you wind up with 2 the most number of years before they emancipate, or it's kind of just, it's little things. So where does it start? It starts with proper guidance, proper preparation, and the right attorney at the end. Yeah. So Alexandra, great stuff. Appreciate on mediation. It can be a very overwhelming. But again, you don't want it to be a wasted opportunity. Even if, as you are required, we are as well. You just don't want to go through the motions, because I've seen plenty of attorneys just walk in wholly and fully unprepared.
Me as well. Thank you, Scott.
Well, thank you for joining. And as well, just continue to tune in to the podcast things and really tidbits of information about preparation. We talk a lot about that in the podcast. And that really starts with an attorney who's done this before, does it exclusively like we do at Cordell and Cordell, and then has the experience and can give you those additional tools and resources to make the most of your time in something like a mediation. So continue to tune in and subscribe to the podcast so you're not missing out every time we drop something new. Check us out at cordell.com. You can schedule an appointment right from the website without picking up the phone. Go to all of our social media, as well as check out our YouTube channel, where we have podcasts, we have the live version, we have all of the previous town halls loaded in there with information I know you'll find useful for you. So until next time, have a great week.